I had shown you a model that I use to explain what it means to have a meaningful, fulfilled life that's resilient so that we can withstand those storms in life. And like we've been talking about all week, like we right now are facing one of the biggest storms that most of us have faced in our lifetime. Pretty much anyone who was born post World War II, this is probably the biggest one we've had to face. And so this is where we need to have a foundation of resilience. And if you're feeling like you don't have enough resilience to manage all of this, this is where the structure and the foundation and me teaching you how to build that foundation is really helpful, because you can increase your resilience even now so that you really can thrive throughout this time. So if you look, I've shown you this model again today. I sent it to you in your handouts. The fulfilled, meaningful life. And I've drawn this like a house because a house needs a good foundation. And that's why we have this foundation of resilience below the house. And this resilience, as I explained at the beginning of the week, it really is rooted in faith, because faith informs how we build the rest of the pillars. And faith is interwoven throughout the pillars. And whatever that faith looks like for you, whether that is a religious faith, and whether it's just having faith in yourself, having faith in others, having faith in the laws of nature, these things all kind of helped us to form that foundation. So we talked about this week how meaning builds purpose and resilience so that we can face the challenges that we're faced with head on and keep moving forward. It allows us to stay standing even in the midst of those storms. So building a foundation of resilience through personal development, focusing on the three main pillars. That's what we've been talking about all week. And each of these pillars then needs to be rooted in faith, like I was saying, whether that's in God, in others, in self. So thinking about those three pillars, the who am I? We talked about that earlier in the week. And this is that self-identity, self-definition. So thinking about what is your identity? How do you define yourself? How do you see yourself? Your perceived self, your ideal self, all of these are wrapped up into that question. And through that and through exploring there, we learn how to be more self-accepting and to have some self-love. And then we go into the question of where do I belong? That's the second pillar. It's the relatedness, it's connecting. So thinking about how do you relate to other people? What's the quality of your connections? And we also need to be connected to ourselves, connected to others, to God, to nature. And to the universe. We are all interconnected. And so it's really important when we're building a foundation of resilience that we make sure that we are connecting with others, that we are staying connected. Then what is my meaning and purpose? It's thinking about what motivates you. What are your passions? What are your hopes and your dreams and your goals? It's about finding meaning, finding fulfillment, satisfaction, joy. And when we start to answer those questions, we are building up that resilience. Another metaphor would be something like a plant, and the roots of the plant are kind of like the pillars, and they're gaining strength and nutrition from the soil, and that's through faith. And the stronger the root system, the more resilient the plant is. And so we need resilience in order to thrive. If we want to thrive and stay strong during this time, we need to be working on that foundation. And so yesterday we also looked at effective goal setting. So keeping us on track to achieve those goals. And today I want to introduce the topic of opening the floodgate. This is their new topic for today. So a floodgate is a last restraint that's holding back an outpouring of something that's powerful or substantial. And so I want to tell you this story about this vision that I had many years ago. And it was of a dam. It was a very big, tall dam. And it was holding back the water, and the water was heavy behind the dam. But below the dam, where the riverbed used to be, it was dry and it was barren, and there was very little life or vegetation that could be seen in that area. And then the floodgate opened and the water flowed, and it brought back life everywhere that water touched. And the banks of the river that was dry then started to teem with life again. And this is this idea of the thriving and the resiliency that I've been talking about all week. And so, and I see this very much, that when we develop this sense of meaning and purpose, it starts to allow us to become stronger inside, but then we become free to start opening some of those barriers that have been holding us back, so that all of the power of the potential that we were born with is finally able to start flowing through us and reaching other people. Now, the water that I use in this analogy, it's symbolic of your potential to transform yourself and the world around you. It can also be symbolic of, for example, the Spirit of God. When we are putting up barriers through our lives, we are often using our own free will in a way that stops the power of God or the Spirit from flowing through us and moving into the lives and touching others. And so just thinking about it in those kind of terms, like there's this idea of this floodgate. When it opens and the water flows, and it is powerful, and it can be tremendous in how it reaches out and touches others. And so when we're really truly living and growing and flourishing, we start to exceed our own expectations. We're achieving and surpassing our own limited perception of our potential. Most of the time, it's not that we don't have the potential to do some of the things that we haven't achieved. It's that we believe we don't have the potential, and that lack of belief in itself becomes the barrier. And so this is when we start to really thrive, when we start to get in touch with who we really are at the core, and what our goals and our motives and our purpose is in life. We're then free to start opening up some of those barriers. And throughout human history, we have human beings that are dreaming things that are seemingly impossible. And over time, those things that we thought were impossible have not just become possible, but they've become possible for the masses. So, I think of things like the advances that we have in medicine and the advances that we have in technology are really great examples of this. I remember back, and when I was a kid, our first family computer was a DOS system. It was a 286. That's 286 megabytes of RAM space. And it took up the whole desk practically. And now we carry computers that have 200, 300, 400 times that kind of RAM in our pockets. And this is what technology has done over the years. And it takes the impossible and makes it possible. And we can apply these things to any area of our lives. When we start to dream, we can start to make things that seem impossible and make them possible. I also remember as a kid watching the news when they were talking about what to expect in the future. And they were saying it wasn't going to be a long time. It wasn't far off before we were going to have cellular phones where we could be answering the phone in our living room, walking out the door and getting on the bus and traveling to the other side of the city. And I thought, that's crazy. There's no way that could happen. And yet it did, because we have taken the impossible, we've made it possible. And so I want you to think about some of the things in your life that you think are impossible. Maybe you're just looking at the circumstances around us right now and it feels like it's an impossible situation, but we will get through this, and we can make a difference in our own lives, our families' lives, the lives of people around us. We can make it a contribution to the world even now. So meaning and purpose, it builds that resilience, as I was saying, so that we can face our challenges head on and keep moving forward. And so I hope that you're starting to dream a little bit again. A lot of us have been maybe stuck in just the busyness of life. And now that we have a little bit of time, we can start to dream again. And I don't know if you know this movie. How many of you have seen the movie Meet the Robinsons? It's a Disney animated movie, and it actually is one of my favorite movies. And the primary theme in this movie was keep moving forward. So for those of you that haven't seen it, I won't give too much of a spoiler, because I do recommend that everyone go and see this movie, because it really is really well done in the messaging. And the message is keep moving forward. And over throughout the movie, they repeat this message. And in the movie, the basic premise of the movie is this little young boy, and he travels in this time machine that had come back from the future, and he's in the workshop, and he sees, oh, there was the time machine, prototype number 1 and number 2, and prototype 64 and prototype 285 and 1379 and so forth. And this was the point, is every time there was a failed prototype, the inventor was able to learn from it, change some things, and try again. And we need to apply those same principles into our lives. And so really, like that, I absolutely recommend. If you haven't seen it, if you have kids, it's a great movie to introduce this concept of keep moving forward and trying and not being worried about the failure to your kids. And about teaching them to dream big and pursue their goals. Now, many of you might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I've included a graphic of that just so that you can kind of see what that looks like. We're not going to talk a lot about the hierarchy. I'm just going to go through each section really briefly. Those are the basic needs: breathing, food, water, etc. Safety. We need to have, a sense of safety around our body. We want to have a sense of security around our employment, of our resources. And I know that the safety piece is a big thing for people right now. But finding some ways where you can still find a sense of safety, even through the difficulty. And we're very fortunate here in Canada, where our government is trying to make some steps to give people at least some sense of financial safety for the moment. And then above that is this sense of love and belonging. And so we've really been talking a lot about that sense of connection and love and belonging with others as being a really important part if we want to thrive. And then we have the self-esteem, and this relates to the self-identity and the self-definition and confidence, respect. And so this is another area. And then at the top, Maslow has self-actualization. And this is where we find things like morality and creativity and spontaneity, problem solving. These are all higher functions. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't include meaning and purpose. If you notice, meaning and purpose are never there. And that's because it's missing. And so self-transcendence, this really should be the top of the triangle. If you look at that top level of the triangle and we make a horizontal line in the middle of that, we could take self-actualization and put self-transcendence above that. Now, self-transcendence is at its core is about transcending or rising above the self, going beyond yourself. It's relating to that which is greater than the self. And so in simpler terms, it's the realization that you are one small part of a greater whole and then acting accordingly. And that which is greater than the self can be a full range of things. This can be something that we look to that beyond ourselves as other human beings in general. It can be nature, the universe, divine power. And it doesn't matter what the greater thing is, only that we have something greater than ourselves. It's going beyond ourselves. So it's getting involved in a cause. Maybe, you want to get involved with environmental actions, or you might want to get involved with something that's religious, or you might want to get involved with helping the poor. There's many different things that we might want to get involved in. And so starting to think creatively and outside of the box, even during this time of self-isolation, how can you rise above yourself and contribute to the greater world? Self-actualization, the top level that Maslow had, it is a worthy goal. And this is the personal development that we've been looking at a lot this week. Now, we don't want to cast that aside and say, I'm just going to pursue self-transcendence, but understanding that we need both. So self-transcendence, it is being other-focused instead of self-focused. And it makes having concerns about higher goals other than the goals that are self-serving. We can have lots of goals of saying, I want a better house, I want more money, I want my spouse to be different, I want a new car. We can have these self-serving goals, or we can have these goals that go beyond ourselves and contribute to the greater world around us. So Viktor Frankl, he was a psychiatrist that was in Auschwitz. I talked about him earlier in the week. And he said transcendence is rooted in our spirituality, and our spirituality is part of humanity that separates us from all other species, because spirituality is something that's unique to humans, and it makes us different than the animal kingdom. So Dr. Wong, who I also mentioned earlier in the week, he says that one cannot become fully actualized or a whole person without reaching self-transcendence. And it requires an individual to come to a satisfactory conclusion about their place in the higher order of things. So recognizing that we have a place, and that there's this natural order that God has set forth in nature, and we have our place within that. And this higher purpose that we all have is to make a contribution. But how I make a contribution and how you make a contribution are going to be very different. And those are the things that we get to decide. I believe that God has put desires in our hearts for things. And when we stop and we listen to our hearts, we often get a lot of information about what direction we need to go in our lives. And that is giving us some information about where our purpose is. So essentially, self-transcendence is about meaning and purpose and significance, and it requires a contribution to something or someone other than ourselves. And so when we're truly living and growing and flourishing, we can start to exceed our own expectations and achieving and surpassing our own limited view of our potential. So, in order to start really living our potential, it requires responsibility. Responsibility is something that we need. We need to have responsibility in our lives. We need to be responsible for ourselves. We need to be responsible to others. So first of all, recognizing that your potential is your responsibility. No one else is going to make you achieve anything or stop you from achieving anything. It really is up to you. Sure, there can be life circumstances, but if our goal is a noble goal and we're really earnestly pursuing it, then we have the responsibility for looking for ways to get around the barriers that might get put in our way just through life happening. Life happens, right? So you're responsible for your own choices. You have to make a choice between good and evil. You have to make a choice between being trustworthy or betrayal. Between growth and stagnation, between structure and chaos, between fear and courage. These are all the choices that we need to make on a regular basis. You're also responsible for self-discipline. We have to discipline ourselves in the pursuit of our goal. If we set a goal for ourselves, but we are not self-disciplined, it's easy to not follow through. And so we should also be pursuing these goals of excellence, integrity, authenticity, sacrifice, and hard work. These are goals that we should all be pursuing simultaneous to whatever our specific purpose goals are. And you're responsible to hold yourself accountable. So you need to be accountable to yourself. You need to be accountable to others. We need to be accountable to society. Right now, we can really see that an example of being accountable to society through the social distancing. We have an accountability, we have social responsibility that we need to follow right now. And as much as it can be a struggle sometimes, I know it's really hard to be stuck in my house all day, every day with 2 kids and a dog and a cat, and I want to get out sometimes, but unfortunately, this is the reality that we're facing right now. But we have a duty to our country, we have a duty to each other to follow the rules for our own protection and for the protection of others. You're also responsible to hold yourself to a higher power. So for myself as a Christian, that higher power is the Christian God. If somebody has other faith beliefs, but you must have something higher than yourself that holds you responsible, even if it's just being responsible to the universe. You're responsible to share in the duties and the burdens of others. So the duties and the burdens of others include your family, they include your community, your country, society, and even the planet. And so a floodgate is a barrier to your fulfilled, meaningful purpose. So we were talking about right at the beginning about what is a floodgate, and it is something that's holding back something powerful and substantial. And so your barriers might include things like negative beliefs about yourself. Your barrier might be a lack of goals or unclear goals. Maybe you have a fear or an insecurity about something. Or maybe you just lack motivation. If you follow the principles I've been teaching you all week, you can start to build up your motivation. And you can start to change some of the negative beliefs about yourself. You can start setting better goals. Your fear or insecurities about yourself often are much less when we're well connected. Maybe it's a lack of commitment. Maybe you're not really committed to your goal. Maybe it's not even really your goal. Maybe it's someone else's goal for you, and then you're not really committed to it. Or maybe you just have a lack of support. Sometimes we don't have enough support people around us. And so the only way to change how much support we have is to go out and seek out like-minded people who can support us in our goals. So opening the floodgate to your awesome potential means working to remove the barriers. So thinking about what is keeping you from being able to build a life of meaning and purpose, and a life that's thriving and fulfilled and satisfying. Think about what parts of your foundation need to be reinforced. We reinforce our foundation through embracing awesome, embracing our own awesome, knowing ourselves, the awesome of connection, making that connection with other people, and the awesomeness of your meaning and purpose. It takes time and it takes effort. It's transformation, and it's not a quick solution. So if you've been following along all week, you can see that really, as I said the other day, like, we are laying out a roadmap for you. But it's not like the transformation in your life just happened from Monday until now. This is a process, and I've taught you some principles that you can apply and that you can use. But it's not something that's going to be a quick overnight. It's about having some dedication to these principles. And so if you think about it, in the last 5 days, we've just really scratched the surface on exploring just how awesome and amazing you are, and how you can thrive even in your isolation during this time. So by applying some of these principles of meaning, you can improve your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. You can live a life that's worth living, be who you were created to be. You can overcome adversity. You can start really thriving and loving your life. You can increase your confidence and your self-esteem. You can connect with your passion. You can have more satisfaction, contentment, and joy. You can develop more meaningful relationships, and you can start seeing yourself through God's eyes and start living to your full potential, and start turning the I can'ts into the I cans. And so that really is my why. I've said many times to people, before we can figure out what to do, we need to know why we are doing it. And for me, helping people to achieve fulfillment in their lives, to achieve meaning and purpose, and really contribute to the world in amazing and awesome and meaningful ways, because I want to help people like yourselves not only become the best versions of yourselves, but to transcend yourselves, to grow and to flourish and to truly shine.